The story begins with a story called Bad Luck is a Bitch. That afternoon, Mayette drove Wilmer out of his house. Wilmer is a technician who often comes to Mayette's house to repair her house. Before entering the house, Mayette, who was holding her dog Cosmo, was stunned to see an old grandmother coming to beg for her. The grandmother named Lola showed hand gestures asking for food. On her chest, the grandmother carried cardboard with writing on it. The article explained that Lola's grandmother could not return to the village because her only child died of COVID. Unable to bear to see the fate of a grandma who is very painful, Mayette invited the grandmother into the house. Patiently, Mayette prepared nutritious food for her grandmother which she devoured in a hurry. Not long after, Lizzie, Mayette's only daughter, joined the dining table saying she had met the beggar's grandmother. Mayette explained that the beggar's grandmother was dumb and deaf. He came asking for food and stood for a long time in front of the house. Lizzie said the face of the grandmother she fed yesterday was exactly like Lola's grandmother. The difference is that the grandmother that Lizzie helps can talk and can hear. Lizzie returned to her room. Carlos turned to rush to meet his wife. Carlo asked Mayette for the daily newspaper that was usually delivered in the morning. While rushing into the room, Carlo said there was an important meeting via Zoom with his assistant, Marianne. The beggar grandmother got up from the dining table to wash the dirty dishes in the kitchen. Mayette came over and said that Lola's grandmother didn't need to do any housework there. At that instant, the flies flying around his head made Lola angry. The grandmother killed the flying fly with one hit, which surprised Mayette. Before Grandma Lola left, Mayette brought her various kinds of food as well as supplies. Mayette accompanied Grandma Lola out of her house while saying that she would be available to help if Lola needed help. While walking in front of the yard, Grandma Lola suddenly whimpered in pain. Forced, Mayette brought the grandmother to stay at her house until her condition improved. Mayette asked her husband for permission to let Lola's grandmother live with them. Carlo teased his wife while asking, what if Grandma Lola was sick with COVID? After discussing the two of them, they finally gave Lola's grandmother a bed in the attic of the house. Lizzie and Mayette peeked from under the stairs talking about the sleeping grandmother. Lizzie seemed to have a harder time accepting new people in her house. He feels uncomfortable and insecure around strangers. In the morning, Grandma Lola had woken up early and enjoyed every inch of this magnificent house. After a few hours passed, Mayette was surprised by the sight of the kitchen already filled with delicious dishes. Apparently, Grandma Lola woke up early to cook and served it very neatly on the dining table. Mayette enjoyed the breakfast together, joking and joking. Lizzie is still suspicious of Lola's grandmother and is reluctant to eat breakfast, especially since Lola's grandmother is from the village of Visayas. According to legend, the inhabitants of the Visayas are very attached to the original animism of the Anato and are claimed to have direct contact with spirits. Mayette advised her beautiful daughter not to think badly. Carlo also teased his daughter who was close to a young man named Dexter. The young man who was close to Lizzie had studied the occult world and believed in the use of amulets and magic spells. Lizzie explained to her parents that Dexter was nothing more than a close friend and often exchanged opinions with her. Lizzie is attracted to Dexter because he often tells tales of monsters, wizards, and urban ghosts in their area. After breakfast, Lizzie returned to her room while telling Dexter about Grandma Lola. Lizzie confessed that she was frightened by Grandma's suspicious behavior. Dexter said he would send a protective bracelet and asked Lizzie to continue wearing it. If Grandma Lola was a bad person, Lizzie would feel hot when she was around her. That night, Lizzie woke up and went out to get a drink. The girl heard a commotion downstairs. He peeked from the stairs and found Grandma Lola naked all alone. The old woman was performing a strange ritual by chanting a terrible incantation. Before being caught, Lizzie ran to her room and immediately called her mother who was still sleeping in their respective rooms. Lizzie asked Carlo's dad to check on Lola's grandmother who was dancing naked downstairs. Carlo came out of his room and rushed to his son's room. At the same time, Grandma Lola sneaks back into the attic without Carlo knowing. After hearing Lizzie's story, Carlo checked the floor below and found dozens of black candles lying there. Carlo called Grandma Lola in front of his wife and children to ask for an explanation of what he was doing. Lola's grandmother was silent when she heard Carlo's screams that kicked her out of the mansion. After Carlo finished speaking, Grandma Lola smiled faintly as she sat on the sofa. The grandmother turned into a cruel and evil figure instantly. He said he would never leave the house because he really liked living there. The grandmother even crossed her legs and showed her long thighs. He admitted that he did not accept that he had been given a narrow room in the attic of the house. He even spat on Carlo's house and insisted on staying in it. Carlo got more emotional and got up from his seat to drag Lola out. But suddenly, Lola clicked her tongue 3 times and made the 3 occupants of the house obey all her orders. Turns out, all this time Lola was a practitioner of black magic, who was able to hypnotize her victims with the sound of a snap of her tongue. By the time breakfast came, Lizzie, Mayette, and Carlo looked dazed. Lizzie was still reluctant to eat the food and went to her room. Lola's grandmother said that Cosmo's dog meat tasted really good. The cruel beggar grandmother apparently slaughtered Mayette's pet dog and forced them to eat it. Under Grandma Lola's hypnosis, Mayette and Carlo looked confused and sat up and didn't know what they were doing. Mayette suddenly burst into tears by herself while Carlo got angry for no apparent reason. Lola toying with their minds even more by whispering bad thoughts to Mayette and Carlo. Lola accuses Carlo of cheating on her with Marianne's assistant and accuses Mayette of having an affair with a repairman, Wilma. The husband and wife who were originally happy and living in harmony immediately changed 180 degrees. Carlo, who was carried away by his emotions, beat Mayette down. Meanwhile Lola, giggling on the balcony of the house while enjoying her favorite song. Lizzie that afternoon got a call from Dexter, who was worried about her boyfriend's condition after a long time not giving news. Knowing that a threat was approaching, Lola suddenly entered Lizzie's room and whispered a spell to her. Lizzie, who was originally about to confide in Dexter, turned off her phone. Lola began to sow the seeds of depression in Lizzie that she felt very sad and frustrated. Lola giggled as she said that Lizzie was a useless child, ugly, and hated by everyone. Lizzie got more and more stressed about it and broke the walls of her own room. Over time, Grandma Lola managed to control all the wealth and fortune of the Carlo family. Meanwhile, the original occupants of the house were rendered helpless by the dark hypnotic effect of Anato's magic. With a flick of her tongue, Grandma Lola made Carlo and Mayette fight every day and made Lizzie even more depressed and locked herself in her room all day. One night, Lola told Mayette that she used to live in a very small house without a bathroom or sofa. Throughout her life, Lola has always lived in economic difficulties even before the COVID pandemic hit. That night, Mayette and Carlo slept outside the room on 2 separate sofas. They began to realize that there was something wrong with them all along. Since Grandma Lola was already asleep, the flick of the tongue was no longer audible. Carlo and Mayette apologized to each other for their respective mistakes, and returned to harmony as usual. Unable to see other people's happiness, Grandma Lola reappeared and applauded the sincerity of their husband and wife couple. Carlo and Mayette are still conscious that night and try to kick Lola out of their house. Unfortunately, Lola's grandmother was furious and hypnotized Carlo and Mayette into banging their own heads against the wall. In the morning, Mayette meets the packager who sent Lizzie the camera. On that occasion, Mayette whispered to the packager that he needed help. Lola's grandmother appears and asks whose package came. Mayette rushed into the house saying that Lizzie needed a camera to vlog in her room. Lola laughed while asking why vlog during a pandemic. Turns out, Mayette bought a camera for Lizzie and asked her son to run away to his aunt's house. Mayette persuaded Lizzie to take her word for it because she couldn't bear to leave Carlo at home alone with Lola. Before Lizzie left, She opened the amulet that Dexter had given her, which was said to remove magic within a person. To use the amulet, Lizzie had to focus on staring at the necklace ball while chanting Sism over and over. That night, when Grandma Lola was busy ordering clothes, Lizzie slipped away with the help of her mother. Maya tried hard to distract Lola to stay focused on her online shopping. Lizzie managed to get out of the house and immediately ran to her aunt's house. Not long after, Maya's doorbell rang. Lola's grandmother walked to the door to meet the guests that night. Maya was carrying a glass flower vase ready to hit Lola's head with it. Unfortunately, Grandma Lola could see Maya through the dark glass of the door. Grandma Lola clicked her tongue 3 times and hypnotized Maya into hitting her own head. Lola leaves the house and it turns out that Dexter has come to check on Lizzie's condition. Lola clicked her tongue and tried to hypnotize Dexter into returning home. The Gendam magic didn't work for Dexter at all. The young man insisted on going into the house and found Lizzie's parents unconscious on a chair. Lola's grandmother begins a magical battle with Dexter until her true form as a witch is revealed. At the same time, Lizzie was forced to return home because of the lockdown. All residents are prohibited from traveling far, let alone not wearing a mask on the streets. Lizzie kept begging the 2 neighbors to help her sick parents. As they walk to the house, Dexter is fighting against Granny Lola's black magic. Although initially managed to dodge, Grandma Lola's senior strength can paralyze Dexter. Lizzie ran into the house with her 2 neighbors. Lola again hypnotized them and sent the 2 neighbors home. Meanwhile, Lizzie is forced to slap her parents on the head and kill them with a kitchen knife. Lizzie pretended to follow Lola's orders even though she was already immune to magic because she wore the amulet that Dexter had given her. Unfortunately, Lizzie's clothes were revealed and Lola saw the talisman. Lola cast an even stronger spell and made the knife in Lizzie's hand move towards Lizzie. Dexter wakes up weak and asks Lizzie to cast a magic spell. With the help of Dexter's spell, Lizzie kept shouting Sism, until the knife in her hand managed to cut Lola's neck. The beggar's grandmother finally died and was buried in the yard. The next morning, after burying Lola's body, Mayette was again visited by beggars asking for food. This time, Mayette didn't want to be too kind like her previous experience. Mayette only gave enough food and let the beggar go. It seems that the bad experience of doing too well makes them give up and be more introspective to act naturally. The story changed to the title Shit Happen. That night, Becky, who works as a nurse at the hospital, had a guest from the patient's family in room 201, named Rodrigo Magpayo. Rodrigo had fallen into a coma and is now back awake. Rodrigo's daughter asked Nurse Becky to immediately invite a doctor so that her father's condition was checked immediately. Becky spoke into the microphone asking Dr. Manelson to come to room 201. Mr. Rodrigo's daughter rushed back to her father's room waiting for the doctor to come visit. Another nurse came to Becky saying that Dr. Manelson had just come home. Nurse Reggie advised Becky to double-check before calling her doctor's name. Reggie helped call the doctor who was still on duty that night, Dr. Agaya. Not long after, the doorbell for room 207 rang for a long time. Becky immediately checked the patient in room 203, which was occupied by a middle-aged woman. The female patient looked very frightened and pointed before her eyes, pleading for the creature to be expelled from her room. Becky was quite annoyed by this and hurried off. The female patient grabbed Becky's hand, pleading with fear. The nurse stepped out for a moment and composed herself behind the door. Reggie reappears and reminds Becky to take her job seriously. Due to Becky's negligence, Reggie has to go the extra mile to complete Becky's messy errands. Becky seemed reluctant to work at the hospital. He always complained while saying he wanted to resign immediately. As the evening wore on, Becky rested at the reception desk until she almost fell asleep. A fly suddenly lands in Becky's mouth, interrupting her precious rest. Room 207 patient Luzviminda Santos was seen sitting in a wheelchair alone blocking the road. Becky immediately took the patient to his original room and laid him on the bed. Carrying her alone, Becky had a hard time getting rid of the patient's heavy body. Becky put Grandma Santos upside down. The grandmother's feet are on the pillow while the head is in the foot area. After checking her patient's heart rate, Becky walked away as if her job was done. Arriving at the reception desk, Becky called Reggie to change shifts because he would be home soon. Because he didn't get an answer from Reggie, Becky checked the conditions around the hospital, which looked deserted and there was no one there. It turns out that Becky has entered another realm where humans cannot see Becky's whereabouts. At the same time, Becky's boyfriend picks up and asks the Reggies where Becky is. Reggie said maybe Becky was in the bathroom. In fact, Becky is in a different world, confused because she can't find anyone else around. Becky checked room 201 but the patient wasn't in her room. When Becky returned to her desk, a patient from another room was staring at her intently. Becky tried to call but couldn't get through. The doorbell rang loudly from room 207. Becky thought it was Reggie who was playing a prank on her. Furious, Becky opened the wardrobe and didn't find Reggie there. Seeing the bell button near the patient's hand, Becky got even angrier. He accused Santa's grandmother of pretending to be in a coma. Becky covered the mouth and nose of the elderly patient so many times that Santa's grandmother was gasping for air. Already annoyed, Becky slapped him several times and grabbed his hair. Becky even strangles and shakes her elderly patient to get a response from him. Grandma Santos glanced sharply at Becky. The nurse said that Santa's grandmother was very annoying and threatened him to stay in the room. Becky ran out of the hospital ignoring the emergency bell from room 207. Arriving at the front lobby, all the hospital doors were locked tightly until Becky was imprisoned inside. Becky couldn't find anyone else in the place besides Grandma Santos. Forced, Becky went back into room 207 to check on her patient. Arriving in the room, the stench was so strong that Becky almost threw up. It turned out that Santa's grandmother had pooped on the bed and disappeared somewhere. Becky checked the bathroom and suddenly, Santa's grandmother attacked the nurse while spewing dirt in her face. Becky screamed in disgust and the grandmother mysteriously disappeared. Becky washed her face from the granny's vomit and when she turned around, Becky went on a rampage looking for the whereabouts of Santa's missing grandmother. When the nurse was furious, Becky's body was pushed against the wardrobe door which opened so that her face was exposed to human feces on the bed. The grandmother appeared with her tongue sticking out and slapped Becky's head with dirt. Becky was crying in the bathroom while cleaning her own face. Outside the bathroom, Santa's grandmother was waiting happily. Becky ran frantically downstairs. In the human world, hospital conditions are quite crowded with medical workers passing by. Reggie had already packed up to end his shift for the night. Becky is still being chased by Santa's grandmother and hiding in the isolation room. The nurse girl crawled away from Santa's grandmother who kept looking for her. Becky's boyfriend Walter walks home with Reggie. Before leaving the building, Walter got a call from Becky but couldn't hear each other's voices. Walter and Reggie entered the isolation room which looked very messy unlike what Becky had seen. Santa's grandmother managed to find Becky who was about to run away and grabbed her by the hair. Walter and Reggie who were in the room also faintly heard Becky's screams and saw the white cloth revealing itself. Just then, Becky ran into the curtain screaming hysterically. Reggie and Walter check the hospital's CCTV and find Becky in the patient room hallway. Becky, who was tortured by Grandma Santos, was seen alone there without anyone else. Becky was dragged into room 207 and badly beaten by the grandmother. Becky repeatedly pressed the emergency button from number 207. Reggie and Walter rushed to the room and found Becky in a coma. After undergoing treatment, Becky was transferred to room 201 in a fully conscious state. Reggie came to check but Becky screamed loudly begging the woman to be taken out of her room. The ghost of Grandma Santos reappeared with dirt and smeared it on Becky's face. The story changes to the next story entitled which stands for homemade. In the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, the mother of one child, Mallory, was lonely when her husband died in a fatal accident. As a housewife, Mallory is quite confused about building a business to support her only child, Nico. Mallory insisted on opening an online food business even though he could not cook. Learning to cook on her own from the internet, Mallory makes curry and serves it to Nico. His son didn't want to swallow Mallory's food because it was so bad. Even though it doesn't taste good, Mallory still sells his food and advertises his curry products on the internet. He also joined the food business group hoping that someone would buy the sale. After taking pictures from all sides, Mallory uploaded photos of his best cooking to Facebook. Because no one responded to his post, Mallory commented and liked the photo repeatedly. He got a warning from the group admin for allegedly spamming. In the evening, Mallory surfs the internet in search of secret recipes to make all his dishes taste delicious. He logged onto a foreign website that was in Russian. By using Google Translate, Mallory got the recipe to make organic oil that is safe to use as a flavoring. Mallory immediately made the organic flavoring oil from various spices and pork leg pieces. On the web there is a strong warning not to use the secret recipe for more than a teaspoon because it will be very bad to overdose. In the morning, Mallory went back to cooking the curry and applied the finishing touch, the flavoring oil. He asked Nico to taste the dish which turned out to be too good. Nico was licking his own plate and whining for more. Mallory seemed more confident and prepared free samples for his family and neighbors. After giving the food to people, Mallory is still frustrated because he hasn't received an order at all. Nico went back to his mother in the kitchen to eat Mallory's curry. Stressed by the dwindling remaining savings, Mallory accidentally shouted at his son until he cried. Seeing Nico crying, Mallory immediately hugged his little son and apologized. Before going to bed, Mallory checks job application emails, which don't seem to have come to light. Mallory still has not found a job while he has no income. The next morning, Mallory's neighbor Sam rushed over to order curry. Not only his neighbors, Mallory that morning received many orders from his family and people around him. Mallory's life changed drastically from being unemployed to being very busy. He cooks many servings while taking orders that come into his cell phone. Day after day passed where Mallory's sales were getting better and more buyers. Mallory was invited to a cooking forum to share recipes and share business experiences. Apart from being a curry cook, Mallory has also managed to become a culinary influencer. Mallory's savings, which had been running low, have now become abundant, along with the number of online orders. Because he was working alone, Mallory looked very overwhelmed and carelessly poured the flavoring oil. After eating food with an excessive dose of flavoring oil, Nico turns into a violent child. Nico even dared to yell at his own mother to immediately ask for food. The child swallowed his mother's cooking which was still smoldering until his lips were blistered. Mallory patiently applied the ointment to her son's mouth, which was getting worse by the day. That night, he looked for a Russian-language website that shared the secret recipe, but couldn't find it. Nico's condition escalated to the point of acting like a dog. Mallory continued to search the internet for an antidote but couldn't find any clues. Until one night, Mallory was overwhelmed with everything that was happening and fell asleep with his hands dripping with curry sauce. Nico went to his mother and rushed to bite Mallory's hand. Not long after, Mallory's neighbor Sam forced his way into the house and immediately ate the food. When the food is finished, Nico and Sam go crazy and prey on each other. Mallory lures her son with flavoring oil to stop eating Sam's guts. Unfortunately, people who eat Mallory's food are getting fiercer and crazier. They broke into Mallory's house and ate Mallory's body to death. And the story turns to the next story. The last story is entitled I Baba Dinay Khan, which means that no delicacy can beat meat. Melvin is an ordinary man hiding in a secluded cave to care for his terminally ill wife. He always cooks vegetarian food for his wife, Jane, who loves to eat meat. Finished cooking, Melvin immediately fed the vegetables into his wife's mouth. The woman's body was tied with tight ropes, so as not to escape. After eating, Melvin again showed photos of their child, Mila. Mila is now 2 years old and separated from her own mother because her mother's illness is very dangerous. That night, Melvin cried alone in the cave to see his wife's condition never recover. In order for Jane to recover from the hysteria of eating meat, Melvin enlists the help of his partner Charlie to find a way. Melvin forced Jane to swallow vegetables with a spit. Charlie said that the condition only lasted a week. If Melvin could force his wife to eat vegetables within a week, then there was a chance that Jane would recover. Day by day, the two of them went through isolating themselves in the cave. On Jane's birthday, Melvin deliberately made vegetarian bread with candles on it as a celebration party for his beloved wife. Patiently, Melvin shoved the vegetables into Jane's mouth and asked her to dance together. On the 6th day, Jane's condition got so weak that she couldn't stand up anymore. Melvin became very panicked and made another device to put food in his wife's mouth. Jane is now unconscious. Melvin rushed to call Charlie for help, but the phone couldn't connect. Unable to bear to see the condition of his beloved wife, Melvin slashed his hand and thrust the smell of fresh blood into his wife's mouth. Instantly, Jane regained consciousness and immediately ate a delicious dish of human blood. The next day, Melvin and Jane came out of the cave, all of them zombies. And the film ends. In accordance with the title of the film, Rabid, which means crazy, presents a crazy and absurd story. However, it could happen in today's reality. Unfortunately, the quality of each segment is so different that it makes the first part stand out much more than the others. Thank you and goodbye.